Now, KOMO News for Sunday.
Good evening. Mount St. Helens will never be the same again. Perhaps all of us will never be quite the same, never so smug about our ability to control Mother Nature, to try to predict, to deal with the terrible, awesome forces that shape this fragile slice of earth we live on. This morning's violent eruption has killed at least 5 people. At least 3 others are still reported missing. Air Force Reserve rescue crew choppers spotted 2 bodies at a Weyerhaeuser logging camp. An officer said the 2 apparently killed by intense heat. The State Department of Emergency Services says 3 more are dead. We don't know the circumstances of their deaths yet. This is the black cloud of smoke and ash that billowed up from the top of Mount St. Helens shortly after 8:30 this morning. One eyewitness described this day as looking like the end of the world. The end started at 8:32 a.m. when 2 strong quakes measuring 5 or 5.1 on the Richter scale rocked the volcano almost simultaneously. This view 25 miles west of St. Helens at an altitude almost equal to the top of the mountain as you look down on part of the Toutle River Valley. It was followed by a rolling series of harmonic tremors showing magma, molten rock on the move deep inside the volcano. 7 minutes later, 8:39, a tremendous blast shattered the Sunday morning calm. A blast heard as far away as Vancouver, British Columbia, a blast some say that rocked the courthouse in Port Angeles. Smoke and ash billowed 66,000 feet, almost 10 miles above the summit of the 9,600-foot mountain. The northwest face is reportedly blown off. New steam vents reported it triggered mudslides that you can see here on the north and south forks of the Toutle River. A 12 to 20-foot wall of mud, water, and trees came crashing down the mountain at 20 to 25 miles an hour, racing through the Toutle River Valley. It demolished highway bridges along 504 and a railroad bridge in its race toward Interstate 5. The bridges there and even more railway spans, those just north of Castle Rock. I-5 was closed for an 8-mile stretch. It's incredible to try and get the scope of the destruction that this thing wrought. Here is a scene from a News 4 helicopter hovering, or should I say racing down the river just hundreds of feet above a solid bank-to-bank wall of timber. It's almost as if someone had taken a tremendous box of toothpicks, that is, and dropped them out instead of down the river. Interstate 5 was closed on an 8-mile stretch from Chehalis all the way to the bridges. Not far from there, the Toutle flows into the Cowlitz and into the Columbia. An anxious watch to see if the flow would wipe out those bridges. It did not. I-5 was spared, perhaps for now at least. This is a view of some of the destruction. There you can see one single strand of steel railway left in the bridge over the Toutle River there. Someone foolish enough, 2, 3, 4 people standing on what's left of that railroad trestle. Another wall of mud and water had reported to be down the Green River. That's a tributary of the Toutle, 4 feet high, not quite so bad. This is at a Weyerhaeuser logging camp on the slopes of Mount St. Helens. You can see the damage it did. You can also see what it did at Yakima at noon, high noon, and it reported as much as a ½ an inch of the fine volcanic ash right there coming down. It looked like it is midnight. It is 12 noon in Yakima. People reported coming into Yakima hospitals because they couldn't breathe, those with chronic lung problems. People advised to wear wet cloths over their mouths if they had to go out. People told to stay home, and it's that way throughout eastern Washington. Wenatchee, Walla Walla, Spokane reports an 1/8 of an inch of ash on the ground. Ash still falling there. Throughout eastern Washington, it has been a hellish day. A 3,000-acre forest fire reported. Here we see film of the Department of Emergency Services in Olympia, people frantically scrambling to try and keep up with a deluge of information, trying to figure out what was happening and what was about to happen next. As I said, a 3,000-acre forest fire 3 miles northeast of the mountain, an area called Smith Butte. Forest Service crews were going to tackle it. They decided they simply couldn't. 50 to 100 other fires reported by Weyerhaeuser on its land. They're saying it's too difficult to tackle it. We had reports that 3 people were still listed as missing. Some of those people were 2 geologists and, of course, 83-year-old Harry Truman, a fellow who refused to move from his Spirit Lake campground. They are still reported to be missing. A National Geographic reporter was discovered somewhere this afternoon. I might say that at this point, joining me now on the set is Mike Hamilton. He's the assistant news director from KOMO Radio. Mike and Brian Johnson, the news director at KOMO, were up in a small plane shortly after the mountain blew or stacked this morning. You were there. Tell me what you saw.
Bob, we arrived at about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and the scene when we first flew up on the mountain was awesome. Clouds of steam and ash were billowing, it seemed to us, 40, 50,000 feet above. Sunbreaks were coming through, so we still could see parts of the mountain. At that time, we began to see traces of mud coming down the North Fork of the Toutle River as we approached the mountain. The airspace was restricted, but it was awesome. The lightning storms that seemed to come from the top of the clouds all the way into the crater of the mountain were constant. They seemed to meet and crash and come apart. Amazing amounts of lightning as we began to fly into the area. It was very obvious to us as we arrived there that this was a major eruption, and it was nothing that even compared to what had gone, before.
You saw the mud flows. You saw the side of the mountain just boiling down. What was it like?
It was frightening. It was very frightening. We saw this mass of logs and timber roaring down, and I mean roaring at 25, 30 miles an hour down the Toutle River, literally destroying everything in its path. There was much concern about the bridges that crossed I-5. As we began to fly up the North Fork of the Toutle, we realized the force of this mud flow. It literally wiped out everything in its path. We saw logging trucks overturned. We saw bridges wiped out, and we really began to realize what came down from inside the mountain when it blew. And at the same time, the lightning continued, and we could see what seemed to us the north face of the mountain just totally obliterated.
It had to make you feel very small, very insignificant.
It did that, and also very concerned for the people that were below there, what they must have thought as they heard the reports that a massive wall of water, mud, rocks, and debris. Some of these logs looked like they had been, they were toothpicks, like they'd been shredded. A lot of that debris came from Camp Baker, which was a Weyerhaeuser logging camp we learned further upstream. But the destructive force of this was awesome.
It really was. That Camp Baker, by the way, is what we talked about earlier, where they discovered 2 of the bodies. We might point out that up to 2,000 people have been evacuated from the Toutle area. We have a lot more to tell you about Mount St. Helens. Stay with us. As we reported earlier, about 2,000 people have been evacuated from the area right around the town of Toutle along the Toutle River Valley, many of them taken to a school in Longview, Washington, which is serving as an evacuation center. Air National Guard units helping in that evacuation, crews trying to get them out on the ground all throughout the day. It has been one chaotic day. It continues to be chaotic. We're learning things every second that we get in here. Things are changing rapidly, so it is just going to be a situation where everybody has to roll with the punches. One of the people who's been rolling with the punches is Carl Lindy from the Pacific Science Center. We managed to get you down from the wilds of Bellingham, where you didn't even know about this thing until we told you about the eruption. Carl, I might point out, has been with us before on News 4. As a matter of fact, you and I sat in front of a fake mud flow at the Pacific Science Center. We talked about the terrible destructive power that a wall of mud and water and trees and rocks and everything could have. What's your initial reaction, having seen some of the worst fears come true?
Well, just looking at the film here tonight is just overwhelms. I don't know what to say other than it's awesome.
Is there any way that we could have been able to predict? This apparently came without warning. The sharp earthquakes, the explosion this morning, complete surprise. Would there have been any way to predict any of this?
We just don't have a track record on the scenario for the Pacific Northwest volcanoes. This is our learning tool. Mount St. Helens is it.
Someone suggested when they called in to ask a question that perhaps what is happening is that this is a tremendous release of pressure all the way up and down the Cascade range of mountains. Are we likely to see much more from Mount St. Helens? Is there any way to predict that? Is it likely to be a question where other mountains might reflect some of this pressure? We might get volcanic activity elsewhere.
There's basically 2 hypotheses on that. One is that it's all one continuous plate movement. The other is that the plate, though continuous, has pockets of magma, each separate, feeding the various volcanic peaks. The release of energy that occurred today could indeed allow magma to move further into the Mount St. Helens cone.
Mm-hmm. Now, what you're talking about, when we talk about plates, we must remember that there are 2 big chunks of the Earth that are moving over one another from time to time. And when you talk about plates and them coming together, this is what we're talking about. The energy that's stored up just suddenly heaves up through the Earth.
Well, basically, the 2 plates, the North America plate and the Pacific plate, as they collided millions of years ago, caused the North America plate to buckle and form the lower Cascade Mountains. The Pacific plate dove under the North American plate, and then the material melts as it reaches a certain depth, and that molten material works its way back up to form the volcanoes.
That's what we're seeing. Is there any way at all, Carl, to predict what might happen next? Have we seen the worst that the mountain has to offer, or just the beginning?
Probably the beginning, although there's no way to predict.
No way to predict. All right, well, we'll try and keep on top of that. Right now, with the reports on how the state of Washington has been coordinating and dealing with the numerous rescue efforts, evacuation, and road closure activities, News 4's Jim Paymar has been on the scene down in Olympia all day long, talking with the people down there. And Jim has an update on what's happening there.
The Department of Emergency Services has been preparing for this moment since the first major eruption of Mount St. Helens back on March 27th. The pace at DES headquarters was hectic but calm. Everyone seemed to know what his job was, and things appeared to be very organized. At the Department of Emergency Services are a number of state agencies: the Red Cross, the Highway Patrol, the Department of Social and Health Services, and the Governor's Office. All of these agencies were coordinating rescue efforts around Mount St. Helens, as well as tracking other activities such as asphalt and road closures. Reports were coming in from all around the state: mudflows burying the Toutle River, a plane crash in Ellensburg, log jams on the Cowlitz River, a railroad bridge crashing into the river, 5 people confirmed dead, buried by mudflows. All reports were posted on wall charts. There have not been reports of active lava flows, although pyroclastic rock, that is rock heated to extreme temperatures, has been detected, which contributed in the creation of mudflows. The big danger at this point seems to be tons of asphalt being spread across the state and as far away as Idaho and British Columbia. What about the possibility of this asphalt spreading out over livestock, drinking water, irrigation?
Yes, these are problems that are facing us. We have been in touch with the Department of Agriculture. We've been with DNR, Department of Social and Health Services. They are taking ash samples to determine if there is any toxicity to the ash, and if so, what recommendations that they could make. Long-term effects, as projected by Dr. Molyneux, who is with USGS, is that certain types of ash would have an effect on agricultural crops and also possible potable drinking water.
Right now there is no danger of asphalt in the Seattle area, although that could change if the winds shift. Governor Ray appeared at the DES office this afternoon to monitor activities here in the Nerve Center. She told News 4 that all measures are being taken to deal with the emergency.
I believe that we're doing everything that we possibly can. We have helicopters standing by to continue evacuating people from Toutle. There have been some that didn't want to leave. I think they are in danger, and we're urging them to leave. We do have a search and rescue mission underway, trying to find people who might have gone around roadblocks and gone into the area. We know there are some confirmed deaths, and most at the present time is that we're trying to warn people and trying to give assistance to anybody who may be endangered.
The governor says that no new emergency declarations are being contemplated from her office at this time, but that could change if the emergency deepens. If Mount St. Helens were to cataclysmically erupt, the governor said she might have to impose martial law. Across from the DES headquarters is the main office of the Washington State Patrol. Since early this morning, they've been blockading highways around the state that have been threatened by Mount St. Helens, and other roads where visibility has been reduced to near zero because of asphalt. Here is a list of the state roads that have been closed because of the Mount St. Helens emergency. Because of the extreme volatility at the volcano, people are being urged to stay away from the entire region.
Well, the major problem in something like this is always people problems. Now, this was planned on, but the one thing we'd encourage is people to stay away from the area. There are viewpoints many miles away, large high points in the ground that they could see it just as well as trying to squeeze into the areas. We're trying to get equipment into the area and equipment out of the area, and when they try to come in, it just congests things. The second problem is, of course, the massive cloud of dust that's moving into eastern Washington. It's closing highways, and people can't understand the closures, but the closures are many reasons. Number one, you have no visibility. You can't see where you're going. Secondly, the car's system will very quickly clog up with this very fine ash that blocks up the air filters and so on, so we have a disabled car, and that just further complicates our problems. So right now, basically, our major problems are people problems.
The State Patrol and the Department of Emergency Services will continue monitoring activity at the volcano around the clock. The governor's office will be briefed regularly on the status of operations.
We might point out that one of those road closures that we showed you was for Interstate 5. Interstate 5, of course, is now back open again, has been open for quite some time, and apparently will stay open until something else happens. Jim Paymar was down in Olympia. You've been following this thing through. What about federal help? Are they asking for the feds to come in?
Right now, the governor feels that the state of Washington can handle the emergency, that contingency plans have been set up, that all the state agencies are working efficiently and effectively, and there really isn't any reason to call in the federal government at this time. There is the possibility, of course, that the state of Washington is going to ask the federal government for federal disaster relief. I mean, that's almost assured since there has been a wide array of damage all along the Mount St. Helens path today, and we can expect the governor to ask for federal help in the immediate future. One of the things that was very interesting and people were commenting about down at the Department of Emergency Services was the fact that all of the people who owned property around Mount St. Helens were allowed to go in yesterday. The State Patrol escorted them in, and they were really thanking the man upstairs that they were allowed in yesterday and not today.
Now, were all of those people forced to come out yesterday also? Did they have to be out by last night?
I believe so. I don't really know the ins and outs of what actually occurred with the escort, but I imagine that they were escorted in and escorted out. But if they had done that today,
unbelievable.
Yeah,
the chaos,
we don't even want to think about it.
No, we don't want to think about it at all. Jim, thanks very much. I know you'll be keeping us up to date on a number of things, and everybody around here has put in a very long day, not as long as the people who are living in the mountain and under the mountain's shadow and in the fall of the ash have put in, however. It's been a long day. It's going to be a long night and more long days to come, and obviously this eruption took everybody by surprise. One man from Renton on a fishing trip to the area arrived near the town of Morton just after 8:30 this morning. He told News 4's Steve Poole about the incredible, frightening scene that unfolded in front of him.
We made it about 3 miles out of Morton when all of a sudden we got into the rain, and it was raining mud, literally, just like driving through a waterfall with ink. And the mud just continually coming down harder and harder, and of course the wife and the children become very nervous, so I turned around and started back towards Morton, and it continued worse, and you couldn't see. I had the headlights on. The windshield was completely obscured, and you could only drive about 10-15 miles an hour. We continued on out of Morton, and the siren in the city of Morton was going then, and people were leaving and driving out Highway 7. And I knew approximately where the edge of this cloud was, and that's what I was heading for, is to get us out of it, but you couldn't see. And I climbed out of the car twice to get the mud off the windshield, and it was coming down so heavy it was just completely obscured. And I got wet and covered with this stuff myself, and so we continued on, and it was stop and go with the traffic. The cars were pulled over, stopped in the middle of the road. You couldn't see tail lights, and it was just totally black. And finally, I'd say about 4 miles from Elby, we finally come out of it. But the dust from the ash had covered the road, and the dust was standing 4 to 6 feet high off the highway, and you couldn't see through the dust either. And finally, that started to ease up as we got almost to Elby, so we pulled over and cleaned up the car, and we, along with, I'd say 15 or 20 other vehicles, we stopped and started turning traffic back. And you couldn't even see back towards Morton itself. It was completely obscured.
Must have been pretty frightening.
Yes, it was. Wife is still pretty shook, and kids sort of enjoyed it. They're getting a big thrill out of it now, but it was a situation just straight out of hell.
Words I'm sure that a lot of people in that area have used to describe this day, a scene straight out of hell. One man that nobody has heard or seen from yet is 84-year-old Harry Truman. He's the crusty recluse who lives at the camp on Spirit Lake. Earlier this afternoon, News 4's Ken Schramm talked to Harry's nephew, Steve Corange, here in Seattle. Steve's been trying to find his uncle, and what he told us basically was that he was sure that his uncle had 2 escape plans for Mount St. Helens. As crazy as they sound, you have to remember that Harry Truman is the man who's refused to leave through all of this. His nephew says Harry was either going to row his boat out to the middle of the lake and sit the whole thing out if things got really bad, or else his nephew thought that Harry might just try and drive his Caterpillar rig over those mud flows. Well, I don't know. Steve Corange says he was aware of a helicopter at the timberline area on St. Helens earlier today, a chopper with 2 geologists keeping a 24-hour watch on that volcano. Corange assumes the scientists contacted his uncle, that he left with them, but he cannot confirm it. We cannot confirm it now. We'll just keep our fingers crossed for Harry and anyone else who may have been trapped up there. Stay with us. We have a tremendous amount more to tell you about Mount St. Helens. That's next on News 4. I'm going to point out something before we go any further, that the information we have at this stage of the game is that all roads on the east side, all major roads on the east side of the mountains throughout eastern Washington are closed. None of them open. That visibility is still very, very bad. Here on the west side, I-5 is open again all the way. 101 along the coast, open again all the way. The only way to get into places like Walla Walla or Kennewick through Oregon, you have to go down through Oregon to get there. Obviously, this has been a busy day for scientists as they try to work and sort out what happened. More importantly, what might be happening in the near future. News 4's Steve Poole has more on that from the University of Washington's Geophysics Center.
The key feature of today's eruption is that it gave scientists absolutely no warning it was coming. The first inkling of trouble was the simultaneous occurrence of two earthquakes measuring 5 on the Richter scale, then an air shock wave that was felt over 200 miles from the mountain. That sent scientists scrambling to find out what happened, why, and more importantly, what's next.
Tell me about this now. What are we seeing?
Okay, what we're seeing here, this is a digital playback of our analog tape recorder unit. What we're looking at is, this is the earthquake at 8:32 this morning. This is the earthquake which began the volcanic sequence, which is continuing this afternoon. This is, you're looking here, this is a station on the south side of Mount St. Helens. This is about 4 kilometers, a mile and a half or so from the summit. This is a station essentially at Timberline parking lot, and it looks like we just missed the first arrival on the Timberline station. You can see where the earthquake starts. This is the background noise. It's kind of like if you're at the Kingdome, if nothing is happening, there's still you're aware of noise in the background. When somebody scores a basket, then of course the whole place explodes. This is the earthquake. This is the beginning of the 5.0 earthquake. And then you can see that the thing is going on for a number of minutes and rattles on.
Seismically, what is happening with the mountain? What can we look forward to, and what's been happening throughout the day?
Well, I think it's a somewhat unusual situation because we are not having a large aftershock sequence from these two 5s. Aftershocks are continuing. The things that we don't see right now, we don't seem to see tremor. We don't seem to see the aftershocks, continuing. And of course, it's a little bit hard to monitor what's going on right now on top of the mountain because the stations on the north side and also on the south side have been either we've lost our radio links, and they may have been damaged, or it may just be the ash fall that just knocked the radios off.
Now, would that make this an unusual eruption in that sense, and that you don't have continuing seismic activity?
No, in fact, if you look at the eruptions in Central America, often the eruptions cease just before or during often the seismicity ceases just before an eruption, and there's relatively little seismicity associated with the eruption itself. On some volcanoes, we get high amplitude tremor associated with the eruptive process. On St. Helens, we're not seeing that. We're seeing some other physical mechanism, at least the way it's being expressed in terms of the seismic energy release.
Okay, so what's been happening throughout today? More of the same, or do you, at this point, expect anything different to happen? Can you tell?
I don't think that we know what will happen at this point. We're continuing to look at our instruments, and I think we're hoping that maybe some of the near-in stations will come back up if the ash flow diminishes in the air, or if they haven't been destroyed, that sort of thing. We do have other stations, and we kind of have several networks around the mountain. The near-in stations are gone, but we have stations out at about 8 miles that we're using as prime monitoring sites. As to what's going to happen, though, I don't think any of us here know.
He's right. Nobody knows. The aerial photographs we've shown you so far are not the only aerials taken of Mount St. Helens volcano today. Other pictures have been taken from a higher vantage point, a much higher vantage point. Pictures you're about to see taken from a national oceanic and atmospheric satellite 19,000 miles above the west coast, taken at the rate of 2 an hour starting early this afternoon. If you look at them, you can get an idea of just how the plume of smoke and ash above St. Helens drifted east. That plume respects no political boundaries. Already over Montana, some of the ash can be expected to land as far away as the Midwest. We'll be back with more News 4 in just a moment. Well, for a look at what the volcano is doing perhaps to our weather, for a look at least what kind of a day we might have tomorrow, welcome aboard, Mr. Ramsey.
Yeah, you've been a busy guy there, Bob.
You bet.
In our environs here in western Washington, it is good for us and not so good for, as you know, going a bit toward the east. I see that in Wenatchee at this hour they have a 16th mile of visibility, and they have winds that are practically minimal. And in Yakima, they're having a thunderstorm combined with all this ash. Now, when it mixes up with the rain, the toxicity of the mess is something to be reckoned with. As far as our forecast is concerned, the trajectories that I noticed were 22, and that's like if you're in a boat. 22, it's heading this way. All the trajectory of the ash is going toward the northeast, and the longest plume height I saw is maybe 70 miles, and you'll see this in a moment on the enhanced satellite picture from a mile up. I mean, it's a mile resolution and also down to a half-mile resolution. Our winds would seem to favor us. We'll have the northerly wind off the coast during the night, and then you're going to see a system that is moving along and should be on the coast sometime tomorrow evening. And ahead of this system, southerly winds off the coast 10 to 20. We'll have variable winds here in the inland waters 5 to 15. Generally, the upper winds are from the southwest going east, and the plume height, when I had the big belch, got up to 63,000 feet. They're now running the plume heights between 50 and 55,000 feet. Now, with this system coming in with heights of 20 to 25,000, we will have a tendency, if we're lucky enough to get some rain in here tomorrow night and Tuesday, to start washing that ash down. But above 25,000 feet, plenty more ash. It gets in the circulation going toward the east. And as Bob said, they're starting to see darkness, rather a dark plume coming from the southwest over here in Missoula. It's currently 57 off the coast here at Quileute. Spokane 61, obscuration because of the ash overhead and on the ground. 78 over here in Great Falls. Southerly winds in 93 if we head down to Red Bluff, California. Now, when you look at this system here, I've got Mount St. Helens circled right in that area, and as Bob said earlier, there is the trajectory of the plume heights. This time it was 60,000 feet, cutting right through eastern Washington and Spokane. And if we take let's take the next one, Walter, and this is an enhanced picture, and I have mentioned that the hotter things are, the darker they are in the picture on these infrared pictures, and the lighter, the colder. So this well prescribes the entire plume that covers the mid to southern part of Washington state, all blowing away from us. Now, if we take a look at the satellite picture, Walter, from our 23,000 miles up, we see that if we can pull back a little bit, here might be a benefactor to us. This thing is moving slowly our way, getting in that doggone split. Some goes this way and some goes that way, but back in here is the front. Should be on the coast tomorrow night, and hopefully a 60% chance of rain in here on Tuesday. If we look ahead to Wednesday to find out how we follow these contour lines. And this is the movement of the atmosphere, and you're parked right here. There's Mount St. Helens, everything going to the west-southwest. And so our forecast would look something like this. We're going to have partly sunny conditions to start. Well, we'll have low clouds in the morning, some sun tomorrow afternoon, increasing chance of rain tomorrow night, and then some rain in here on Tuesday with any look at all, and the high was 70. We're currently at about 69 degrees, and our barometer's 30.02, and the winds now at SeaTac are southwest at about 6 or so.
So as long as that weather system keeps coming the way it is?
For us, it's okay, but for over there, they still stay in the path of this belching monster.
All right, thank you. We'll keep you up to date on that. Evacuations have been going on all day long near both forks of the Toutle River in the aftermath of the eruption. News 4's Mike Nestoroff files this report.
The first effect from renewed eruptions have been mudflows on the North Fork of the Toutle River. The wall of mud and ash have been cascading downstream to a Weyerhaeuser logging camp near the town of Toutle. Stacks of logs have been swept downstream at speeds of 25 to 30 miles an hour, washing out parts of the highway, burying homes, and destroying a railroad trestle. Traffic along Interstate 5 north and southbound has been stopped about a mile from the Toutle River Bridge as crowds anxiously were awaiting the arrival of the 2-mile log jam. As it flowed into the Interstate 5 bridge, the jam slowed considerably, and for the time being, the bridge is safe. But further upstream, residents of the town of Toutle and other areas are being evacuated. Helicopters from the Army, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard have been conducting evacuations all day long. They've been picking up residents from near the mountain because of concerns over safety because of the gas and the mud flows.
We're used to that.
I started up my little generator and I had lights and TV, so I was listening to everything that was going on. And as far as we could hear about the wall of water coming down, but we can't see the river from our house, so we didn't know exactly how bad it was. So we just kind of sat around, and then these helicopters kind of started flying around, and this fella here came up, and I took a couple of pictures of him. A lot of good that's going to do me. My cameras at home.
Yeah.
And they parked and landed and told us we'd have to leave because of the gases and stuff, that people were getting killed because of it. So we figured it's about time to go.
Concern for resident safety has increased as late afternoon surveys of the Toutle have spotted a new and much larger mud flow sweeping downriver. The evacuation will continue through the evening. At Toutle, this is Mike Nestoroff reporting for News 4.
News 4's Mike Nestoroff is live right now from a point near Chehalis. He is there with our News 4 live camera. Mike, what's going on right now?
Well, Bob, right now there's apparently a more concern about the Toutle River and more mud flows coming down the river. As you know, all day today there have been a couple of times where rather large mud flows have come down the river and deposited large amounts of logs, mud, and ash at various spots. Now, with me right now is Sergeant Ken Graves of the Washington State Patrol here in Chehalis. Sergeant, what's been happening all day today as far as your men have been concerned on the mud flows?
Well, I've had my men down on 505 and 504 mainly to help with the evacuation and keep additional people out of the river area because of the mudslides and the tremendous water flow that's been coming down the mountain.
All right, now do you have some concern for your people and the people in the area with this latest mud flow, and how big is it?
I just had two people down that left a roadblock on 505 and went in to help evacuate, and I just informed them to get out of there and get to high ground because there was another mud and water flow coming down the river that was apparently in a real strategic area for them.
All right, now what can we expect as far as road closures, and what should people be aware of as far as traveling between Portland and Seattle over the next day or so?
Well, Portland, from here to Portland right now is open, and the freeway is open. We opened it at 3 o'clock again on a temporary basis, depending on whether we had a big flow or a mudslide come down the mountain or not, and take out the main bridge at Toutle, but it's open. Number 12 is closed going over White Pass. 508 is closed, also going up into Morton on that runs parallel with number 12. 505 is closed and 504 is closed. Of course, that goes up to Spirit Lake and up to the mountain, but those are all washed out now, so there are no means of getting up in there at all.
All right, now if there are any more sizable mudslides, do you expect to have to close I-5?
There's a very good possibility, right. They could do some damage to the understructure of the bridge, and of course you can't let any vehicular traffic go across it until the highway engineers could inspect it and give us the okay to let it go.
Okay, thank you. That's Sergeant Ken Graves from the Chehalis detachment of the Washington State Patrol. We've been standing by all day, and the mountain has continued to erupt. It's spewing ash still at a limit of about 60,000 feet. Bob?
Mike, before you let the sergeant get away, very quickly, we had heard that there was no damage to the I-5 bridges in the earlier mud and water and timber coming down there. Is that correct?
Sergeant, has there been any damage at all to the I-5 bridge, or do you consider it safe at this point?
Well, I don't personally know because I didn't make any inspection, but our staff people are there, and the highway engineers did inspect the bridge, and we were given the okay to let traffic proceed, so I assumed that it was safe for everybody to go over.
All right, and I might add that as we flew over it about an hour and a half ago, we did notice that there were State Patrol and Highway Department people on both sides of the bridge monitoring the embankments and everything to ensure that if there is any problems that do develop from mud flows or log jams, that they will certainly close the bridge as soon as they find out. But at this point, the bridge is open and traffic is flowing smoothly.
Thanks very much. Well, believe it or not, there is other news today, other things going on. In Snohomish County, jail officials say things are back to normal following a small riot at that facility last night. Several small windows broken in an incident apparently prompted by inmates trying to haul contraband up to their jail cells at the end of a rope. About 8 inmates in the jail's maximum security area were involved in that incident, setting some small fires that were quickly put out by jail personnel. No one injured. The prisoners finally locked back in their cells with the help of Everett police. Authorities say Fishing from jail windows, that is hauling up drugs and other contraband, has long been a problem without a solution here, that it gets worse at this time of year.
This time of the year, as the weather gets better, it seems to get a little worse. We have more people that like to run little lines out some vents that they have installed on the windows, and then people come up through the weeds on the outside and attach drugs and drug paraphernalia to them, and they haul them up. And apparently when their source is cut off, they get quite upset.
Despite the disturbances last night, the jail was open again to visitors this afternoon. In Miami, at least 11 people have died in rioting that started last night after an all-white jury acquitted 4 police officers charged in connection with the beating death of a black Miami man. And then the Justice Department says it will push for civil rights indictments against the 4 former officers. Today, police report scattered violence, sniper fire, and arson in the Miami area. At least 150 people have been hurt, 200 arrested. We've got a report from Art Carlson in Miami.
Within hours of a Tampa jury's verdict freeing 4 former police officers in the beating death of a black Miami man, downtown Miami was filled with rioters. The violence started following a protest rally at the Justice Building designed to ease the tensions produced by the verdict. In the past several months, there have been 4 separate incidents of alleged police brutality in South Florida involving blacks, situations the demonstrators say proves the criminal justice system is stacked against them.
I wanted to believe in the American system. No more. Never again.
The National Guard and highway patrols were called out and put on alert by the governor, but scattered reports of violence continued through the night. In the meantime, evidence in the case involving the 4 officers on trial is being held for federal investigators who may file charges of their own. Art Carlson for ABC News, Miami.
A curfew is in effect from 8 tonight, that is, until 6 in the morning. Authorities have stopped liquor and gun sales in Miami. The public schools in Miami will not open tomorrow. From France comes a report that a 3-stage plan is being worked out for the release of the American hostages in Iran. The French news agency quotes unidentified sources as saying the plan will go to the new Iranian parliament on June 5th. If the parliament agrees, the 3 diplomats being held at the Iranian Foreign Ministry would be released first. Then another 40 would be let go as soon as negotiations opened between the U.S. and Iran on the billions of dollars in Iranian assets now frozen in the United States. The sources are quoted as saying the final 10 hostages, the ones the Iranian militants think are spies, would probably go through an inquiry about their past activities. They would be released once the U.S. and Iran signed a treaty of peace and neutrality. Europe's common market foreign ministers today have okayed limited economic sanctions against Iran that leaves intact their oil contracts and $7 billion in trade. It falls short, far short of what the U.S. had hoped for. President Carter replied simply yes when he was asked if he was pleased with the action of the allies. The U.S. had wanted the 9 European countries to ban all trade but food and medicine to pressure Iran to free the hostages, now on their 197th day of captivity. The president of Pakistan is urging this country be much more assertive in the Persian Gulf and Southwest Asia. President Zia says Jimmy Carter is paying too much attention to the Iranian hostage crisis. He should be doing more about situations that threaten world security, specifically the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan.
Lives of 50
American
nationals is as dear and as valuable to me as it is for any United States citizen. But I say that there are much greater things at stake at the present moment, and we should take out the emotional aspects of an election year or of the human aspects of this, which cannot be ignored. I agree, but I think there are much greater stakes involved in this issue.
Zia appeared on CBS's Meet the Press. We've got more news and sports and everything else just ahead on News 4. Stay with us. Ray is back with us right now for an update, I guess, of travelers' advisories of some sort.
Travelers' advisories in the Cascades, Bob, and also on the eastern slopes of the Cascades, generally going northeastward from Mount St. Helens. I think that goes without saying that you're not driving over the mountain tonight if you can help it. You can go, but very restricted visibility.
You aren't going to get anywhere, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, thank you very much. With us right now is Bruce King. I tell you, you top what we had in the news today. You topped that in sports.
No way I can do that, but I'll tell you, a lot of Huskies down at Redwood Shores smiling rowing today. Big day for the Huskies, the Pac-10 rowing championships at Berkeley, California today, because the Huskies defeated the California Bears for the first time in 5 races, the Varsity 8, the heavyweight division. They came up with the upset win today. Also joining the Varsity 8 on the victory strand today were the freshmen and the lightweights in the men's division and the women's division, the novice crew from the University of Washington, and along with the lightweight crew. Disappointment, however, in baseball for the Mariners. They were defeated by the Chicago White Sox today by a score of 6-5. White Sox get on the scoreboard early. The strong drive is taken in by Simpson, but the White Sox will score on the sacrifice. The bottom of the 4th inning, that made it 1-0. Bases loaded. Rob Dressler on the mound loses his control, hit Morrison with a pitch right there. That will drive in Chet Lemon with a second run of the ball game. The White Sox led 6-0 through 5 before the Mariners started their comeback. But they came up a run short, as you can see. The White Sox hang on to win it by a score of 6-5. Also in the American League, Toronto crushes the Oakland A's. Kansas City got by the Angels. The Twins over the Brewers. The Rangers defeat the New York Yankees. Cleveland stopped Boston. Detroit down the Orioles. And in the National League, it was Atlanta and the Mets splitting a twin bill. Houston shut out the Phillies. The Dodgers shut out the Pittsburgh Pirates in Los Angeles. The Padres defeat the Cubs. And the Giants over the St. Louis Cardinals. In soccer, well, Sounder fans are still smiling today after their teams come from behind. 3-2 win over San Diego at the Kingdome last night, but for 27,000 plus. But San Diego got on the scoreboard first. Werner Gersdorf scoring there. 2 minutes, 16 seconds later. Watch this goal. Mark Peterson between the legs of the goalie to tie it 1-1. 22 minutes into the second half, San Diego will grab the score again. Gersdorf will give them the lead, knocking it into the corner of the net to make it 2-1. The amazing Sounders come back to tie it on this goal by Roger Davies right here. Sending it into overtime, 4 minutes and 20 seconds into the overtime. Right there, Barton off the leg will drive it into the net. The ball just curls into the corner of the net. The Sounders win their 7th straight, this time by a score of 3-2 in overtime. Today, the North American Soccer League, Tampa Bay defeated the defending champion Vancouver Whitecaps by a score of 1-0. Tampa Bay in the white jerseys came back with the score tied 2-2. They're going to score right there. And happiness, you know, is scoring a goal and winning a game, right? Disappointment is knowing that you let the winning goal score. They have strange ways of showing their happiness in the North American Soccer League, but the fans loving every minute of it in Tampa Bay tonight. Their team winning by a score of 3-2, I should say, down there. In golf, the Colonial Invitational Golf Tournament today came right down to the final hole. Bruce Litsky and Ben Crenshaw were tied for the lead. On the final hole, Litsky over a putt here. He could win it all with this putt, and watch what happens. A 20-footer that goes, it curls into the corner of the net, into the corner of the net. It curls now into the corner of the cup, and he wins $54,000 with that putt. Bruce Litsky winning the Colonial Invitational today. Now let's go to Longacres for a quick look at the stretch run of the day. Watch this, the first race.
Quarter mile to home, it is mostly Malarkey. On the lead by an Trivial Triumph is second by 1. Then it is Alternates on the inside and Colonel Custer. They're coming to the 8th pole. It is mostly Malarkey, but Alternates is driving up along the inside. Mostly Malarkey and Alternates neck and neck. Alternates on the inside, mostly Malarkey, Trivial Triumph and Fast Fire. Alternates on top.
Oh, that's a good race. The 2-6 double at Longacres today worth $231.40. We'll have the feature race on News 4 at 11 tonight. Only sports event that was disrupted today and canceled because of the eruption of Mount St. Helens. They say Northwest Wrestling in Tacoma tonight. The whole thing's been called off. Field's now set for the Indy 500. 33 cars set to go to the line next Sunday. And the baseball contract talks in New York today, they were called off, and it looks more and more like we're going to have a baseball strike come Friday.
Oh, not good news at all.
I'll get the tongue back together, and we'll wait till next week.
Fair enough. Listen, they put 35,000 people in one place today, not in the Kingdome, but it turns out that clam diggers treated to the lowest tide of the year, and 35,000 hit the beaches at Ocean Shores this morning. The diggers had company State Fisheries Department officials out in full force to enforce the 15 clam limit. News 4's Lori Matsukawa has this report on Ocean Shores.
The thousands of people along ocean shores and Copalis Beach look like matchsticks in the sand. Some of the lowest tides of the year occurred at 10:36 today, and clam fans knew it. The art of razor clamming requires patience, waiting for clams to make their presence known with a little suction mark in the sand. What clamming is a time for family and friends to enjoy the outdoors. What it's not is a fashion show. Anything that keeps one warm and dry goes. There are two types of clammers, the ones who use metal tubes to shove into the sand and suck the clams out. There are those who are shovelers, who dig in a downward, oceanward motion to get their prey.
Well, the holes weren't very visible today, so I've been tapping a lot, and when I see the little holes, then I start digging on the ocean side, and then start digging really, really fast, and then dig way down there with my arm until I feel it, pinch it, and just hang on until I get it.
Stamping and poking is a good way to find clams whose necks stick up into the sand. A good stamp will send their necks telescoping down, and that leaves the telltale mark and the sign to start digging.
The best way to get your quota of clams is to look sharply, react quickly, and get to the clam before the tide does.
By 11 o'clock, the tide rolled in, covering up several prime spots. All of today's digging had to end at noon. The quota per person was 15 razor clams. That could be gathered in an hour of hustling. Even those that didn't get their quota enjoyed themselves. They seemed to be as happy as clams. At Ocean Beaches, Lori Matsukawa reporting for News 4.
She didn't say how many she brought back. We've got more on the mountain, the one that used to be so beautiful, still ahead on News 4. State and federal officials have been preparing for the volcanic eruption of St. Helens since the mountain sprang into life in late March. Not knowing just what to expect or exactly when to expect it, scientists from around the world have spent the last 2 months monitoring that majestic mountain. Well, News 4's Ken Schramm spent 2 weeks covering the volcanic activity last month. He's here with us now to give us some perspective on what the Indians call the Smoking Mountain, and how right they were.
Yes, Bob, the once pristine and serenely picturesque Mount St. Helens has been favored in many Indian legends and local non-Indian folklore as well. Dominating the skyline of southwestern Washington, one of the famed guardians of the Columbia, the 9,600-foot symmetrical peak has been dubbed the Fujiyama of America. Activity in somewhat modern times, pioneer artist Paul Kane, back in 1847, painted an eruption of Mount St. Helens, part of a series of eruptions that lasted over 20 years, from 1830 to 1857. During the past 1,000 years, St. Helens has been more active, more violent than any other volcano in the contiguous United States. Youthful in terms of geologic time, the volcano nonetheless has had an eruptive and complex history going back over 37,000 years, even though the most visible part of the mountain, that which we see, is said to be less than 2,500 years old. Long favored by mountain climbers and sightseers, and graceful peak looms above a thick layer of avalanche debris, mudflow deposits, and rubble, evidence of the almost unmeasurable force that shaped it over the centuries. For the past 123 years, St. Helens has been deceptively calm. Still, last year, the U.S. Geological Survey labeled Mount St. Helens an especially dangerous volcano. So scientists were not completely surprised when the mountain began burping small puffs of white steam in March. But as volcanologists and geologists converged on the area, they were surprised and unprepared for how quickly the volcanic tempo picked up. Easily settling into a pattern of shaking, spitting, and belching, the mountain mesmerized. And in its violent spectacle, the threat to life and property became almost lost in a wave of Mount St. Helens t-shirts, cupcakes, and specialty cocktails. Now, scientists have been unable to project and unwilling to predict what the mountain's activity really meant. Some felt the earthquakes, the eruptions of ash and steam might have indicated the volcano was just settling, shifting, much like a house into its foundation. But most scientists instinctively believe the eruptive activity signaled a new wave, a new dimension of violent life. Experts speculate this resumption of activity is indicative of what the future holds for St. Helens, that the volcano can be expected to pour out any number of lava flows over the years, over centuries, building layer on layer of cinder and pumice to its slopes. St. Helens is still in its cone building stage, still in the process of volcanic construction rather than erosive destruction. There are those who believe Mount St. Helens may one day equal Mount St. Hood in terms of size and volume. But the question of what this eruption, the one today, means in terms of all of that is not answerable. This eruptive force could go on for 20 years or end in 20 minutes. A couple of footnotes here. It should be noted that Mount St. Helens is sitting atop and partially concealing remnants of an older volcano, one thought to have been one of the most explosive peaks in the Pacific Northwest. And it should also be noted that over the past 18,000 years, St. Helens has erupted with such force that shattered rock fragments, hot gas, and pyroclastic debris, as well as showers of airborne pumice, was scattered over hundreds of miles. And while it is fascinating and frightening, that makes it somewhat less than unique, at least.
Well, let's hope that that's not going to happen this time. We'll be right back with more news. Some parting comments from the people who live in the chateau and under the ashfall of this mountain as we take a look at some of the destruction Mount St. Helens has wrought in its day of fury. Comments from a mill worker in the town of Morton, a fellow by the name of Bart Delfonso, who said when the mountain went, it looked like the end of the world. The clouds boiled up, white and blue lightning flashes crackled through the mountains, and it rained mud balls, he said, little balls a quarter inch of mud in diameter. And from Dale and Betty Thompson in Puyallup, living a morning of terror at their campsite outside Morton, she told us she and her husband heard one explosion after another, deafening roars, watched a boiling cloud. They packed their Jeep, they fled toward Morton. She says, I never want to live through anything like this again. There's more yet to come. We'll keep you up to date on News 4 throughout the evening and at 11.